Nordgren is our first speaker. Matthew is the founder and CEO at Arcadian Capital, and he's going to be speaking today about the growth of the cannabis industry. Arcadian is a leader in cannabis venture capital, providing capital and support to companies in pursuit of profitability and purpose. Hello, Matthew. Thanks for joining us today, and the floor is yours.
Hey, thank you, Paul. Well, it's certainly a great topic to talk about today, particularly in the emerging asset class that this is still properly defined as a definition of where the industry is, pre-institutionalization. So it's a great time to talk about the growth of this space. As Paul said, we're going to focus on the legal cannabis market, but we tend to talk about this a little bit more as the botanical wellness industry or even plant wellness. And these medicines and these consumer products and byproducts really present what we believe to be the greatest ingredient set in the history of consumer products. And hopefully in the next 15, 20 minutes, we can do a little bit to provide some information as to why we believe that. But I think Gary Allen, our friend from New Frontier on the data side, is after this, and he'll do that as well. But we think about it as the greatest ingredient set we've ever known as a consumer industry. And the reason for that is because of the various categories that these plants can make product for. As an ingredient set, it can be infused in pretty much anything in your grocery store, every shelf, every product, in various ways. There's at least 80 active cannabinoid molecules that are produced in up to 200, 300, 400 that are still prevalent to play with. And so endless combinations as an individual molecule or combined with others. And of course, the plant has plenty of uses in its form and particularly with the hemp plant and its byproduct, textiles, fabrics, concretes. And so now you're not just thinking about everything in the grocery store, but also everything maybe at Home Depot, sugar, salt, coffee, tea, tobacco, all these ingredient sets out there that have, tended to be an ingredient set that has been very influential in consumer products, really doesn't do what this plant does on the byproduct side. In fact, Levi Jeans, I think, said they're never going to use anything but hemp after 2025. And so all these big industries are seeing the value in that side of the equation. And of course, let's not forget biotech and medicine. Everything at your pharmacy is an option to build these products with too. And so the vastness of the category is why we're excited about the growth of this space. And oftentimes, friends, we think about how the tech entrepreneurs must have felt in the 80s and the 90s and the early 2000s in various forms. And at a point in time, let's call it the 90s, we knew that there was the computer and the internet, but it took entrepreneurs from Apple and others to understand computer science in a way that they could build product for the future. That's what we feel like in this industry today. People in the world all know a little bit about this plant, but what they don't recognize is this isn't just the internet or computer. It's a human science, not a computer science. And the work we're doing right now has so much opportunity that the growth, you've all seen a tremendous amount of numbers as to what this industry could be in growth over the years ahead. But the categories are so limitless that it's really hard to tell. But we know we're creating impact. And the way we track a lot of this, and Gary might talk about this, is look at the revenue that the industry is generating from a consumer spend standpoint. In 2016, 17, 18, the industry saw about 27 to 32% compound annual growth number in terms of consumer spend and revenue, which is a great number. And then in 2020, as the industry was deemed essential, I think we're looking at 55 to 62% in growth from just revenue. And this year, expecting somewhere in between. And so you just don't see that very often with emerging industries, especially the last 20, 30 years as we've gone away from an industrial and commodity-driven economy into a tech and innovation economy. The revenue in the early emerging aspects are typically not there like that. And so it's exciting as an emerging asset class. And then you look a little further. What does this have that other emerging industries have had or maybe don't have in the past or now? Well, there are three other things that are really important to track outside just the revenue growth, which is outstanding. Job creation. There's a lot of growth in jobs as well. I think we're over 400,000 employees in North America. And that number is growing at 10 to 30% a year in just jobs, and which is very important to have an industry that can resource families from that standpoint and not just be a low employed type tech business. And so we really value that growth and pay attention to that one as the second one. So revenue, jobs, taxes. I think we're over 5 or 6 billion in taxes in just the last 4 or 5 years. Colorado, since it's become legal, is over 1 billion as a small state. And that money's been used for state programs, things like roads and schools, and it can't be refunded. And so there's a lot of growth in the federal government and the state government's minds from the increase in revenue that they receive from this industry as well. And that's the third one. The fourth one is asset value creation. This is particularly important. If you look at the market cycle we're in, it's the longest bull run in history, which we kind of went straight through even with coronavirus. More money than ever on the sidelines after 11 to 12 years of a bull run, anticipating an event happened. The government also had to step in. All that capital on the sideline came back into the market, kept things stable through now. Interest rates haven't changed, but I think you're going to have to expect them to change. And what happens? Probably some type of correction. It has to happen. There may be a bear in the market somewhere. And in that event, this alternative class becomes even more interesting because it's underwritable. It's a credit provider's dream. Cash, revenue, job creation, aligned with the government and taxes. And now on top of that, these businesses, particularly agriculture, cultivation, manufacturing, and retail, and distribution and delivery, and testing for that matter, are all significantly CapEx intensive businesses. Thousands of employees, all types of equipment, land, licenses, buildings, a lot of infrastructure. And the banks aren't giving the typical lines for that today. And it's an underwriter's dream. You could come in and you've seen 15% type returns with warrants on top of that for some of these credit and debt providers. It's getting a little bit closer to the 9, 10, 11 range, which is also good for growth, cheaper cost of capital, but it's still not 3 to 6%. So I think you have to really look at this market and the growth and the assets that it's creating as another very big indicator of growth. So those are the four main pillars to mention on this call that are very unique and unlike most emerging industries we've ever seen. The other thing that's hard to account for is that this industry also has been around for a very long time. There's our friend Mitch Berukowitz. Hey, brother. Oh, man, nice to see you, Mitch. Nice to see you, Mitch. I think you just logged in, man. Just Matt here saying hello. And so you'll hear from Mitch, too. It's a double-sided growth curve in that sense, because the fifth one to account for that we really can't is this gray market, the illicit market, the black market, the product that's not going through legal channels continues to become less and less and less. Now, this plant's been around for thousands and thousands of years and in its plant form. So we can't account exactly, but I can tell you, being in California and being in this a long time, that every quarter that goes by, the legal market picks up more revenue and the illicit market loses revenue. And so that growth in the opposite way adds to the growth of this industry. So I think the other thing to point out is the growth in the just general support of people. You can see this trending in two directions. Maybe Gary will point this out too, with both the recreational and medical support in this country. I think it's well over 90% support medical cannabis. I believe that's more than veteran support. I mean, if you can believe it. So it's an overwhelming majority of this country in a way that very few topics have the alignment of all people. And then when you look at recreational, that's well over 60. I think I've seen 65, 69%, somewhere in there. And these numbers continue to grow. So the awareness and the acceptability is working as well. That's another growth trend to pay attention to. that's happening in the political world, not just voters. And so, as voters continue to make their thoughts heard, in the last election, we had 5 states move forward, which means in cannabis lobbying terms, 2 senators a state, right? So that's 10 senators that their constituency hadn't spoken before the election, and they have now. I think we have 53 or 4 votes in the Senate to try to get something passed. You're going to need 60. You're definitely not getting that before midterms, but we've already had 3 more states go legal just this year, and probably more before midterms. So you're talking 20 plus senators who have to speak on this topic and take a stance, and their states have spoken. And so that will be very interesting. Of course, Congress will continue to support for this. They believe in the growth. The senators, it's hard to believe we don't have the votes after midterms to think about moving this forward. And so I think pay attention to the growth and the support from both politicians and people, and that's been trending in the right directions for many, 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 many years. Here at Arcadian, we experienced this with kind of our differentiator, which is mostly the non-plant touching products in this space. And so this kind of ecosystem of value creation we've created with 50 companies now, really helps us see this from a macro standpoint and get to talk to all these great entrepreneurs. And you're going to hear from some other great funds. We're all very close as well, and we work together to try to deliver this industry forward in the right way. Because I think outside just the growth we're all experiencing, there's something else that's happening here. It's the ESG component. It's the environmental impact that we can have. It's the social impact that we can have. Female leadership and minority issues and animal concerns and environmental. These are things that are really timely in terms of what the world's feeling right now. And this industry is a great solution for many of those questions and problems out there. And so the growth in just the underlying way of thinking is also very important to pay attention to. We'll talk a little bit about international, because that's another great growth aspect. Europe has been an exciting market for a while. It's moving through the health department in many ways, kind of like Canada, but differently. And so it's going to be a great market. It's going to be done right. It's just taking a little bit of time, but the growth there is continuing. And of course, a great market to pay attention to, particularly Germany and some others. Africa, very exciting. We have a company there called Southern Sky that's really doing some wonderful things. Paying attention to that market, obviously a large market and a supply economy. So Africa is going to be great. India, in the same sense, is trying to move forward a little further behind. They've had some issues outside of COVID, outside of cannabis being COVID and other issues, but India is going to be a great market. China recently a setback on CBD, but Hong Kong's still moving forward. We have a company there as well. A lot of us are involved with that's tracking that market. And I think we have to also mention Latin America. That's really, really, really exciting immediately, particularly Mexico, where we have a team there and we're involved in that market. So a lot of international growth to pay attention to that's going to add to the state's growth. I think a couple other exciting things to mention in this growth sense, these rare cannabinoids. Talked a little bit about them earlier. We really only have 7 to 10 of these things that we're working with today, but there are many more compounds and ways to align these molecules. And so these rare cannabinoids, we have a company called Creo, pay attention there. There's some others, Willow, all trying to follow in line with GW Pharma, who had a great run at it in terms of creating synthetic and natural biotech products and with the rare cannabinoid profile. I think that's a great growth area to pay attention to. Hemp CBD, it's been in purgatory for a while. We have a company called Cadenwood that we're involved with that really is helping us understand the growth there. But I think the consumer is really understanding those molecule sets a little bit better, and the regulations are coming in so that the brands can lead with confidence and ultimately deliver a consumer product on that side. Also, I think on the THC side, something of note, beverage category has been really interesting and a high growth category. We have a company called Can, which is a beverage that's really exciting to pay attention to. A lot of growth in the beverage category. So that's something I would pay attention to as well. But again, I think that the kind of to wrap a lot of this up, I think the thing to take home with you is that it's a great time to be alive. It's a great time to be in botanical wellness. It's a great time to be in plant wellness. And the growth each and every year is just something that we've really rarely seen as financiers of any industry. And Arcadian couldn't be happier to be in this one and working with so many great people and trying to help lead this forward. I think of note as well, from a manager's perspective, and you'll hear from other managers, the conversation has also changed with bigger capital providers. And I think as managers, we've largely been working through family offices and high net worth individuals and things of that nature to provide resources here. But it seems like since this blue wave election happened, and as this year's continued to produce amazing quarterly results for the bigger revenue generators, the spirit of speaking to these larger wirehouses and institutional credit and equity and debt providers really has changed. And you get the sense that everybody does believe that this is going to happen. How and when and where can be debated, but it's almost like there's very few people who just don't think it's ever going to happen now. And so that's helped us. It's helped us as managers. We appreciate working with so many great companies. It's all about the companies, but the ability for managers to offer a vehicle that is hedged, diversified, and proven through a lot of years and a lot of funds is what helps the larger capital say, we want to be in this space. We're not an expert on it yet, but we do want exposure and start to build and take positions. And so I can just tell you that that is happening now. Managers tend to be the likely choice in this stage of an emerging industry, to spread things out and work through these kind of later stages here, if you will. And so stay confident. We certainly are. We're feeling encouraged. We're feeling extremely empowered, and it feels like the resources are in a place that they've never been. So I think that it's interesting to be from Texas. I grew up in Texas, and for so many years, you try to deliver this message back home and this narrative, and all of us are from different places, and every part of the world has a little bit different viewpoint on this topic. And I just think that all of us have a responsibility to continue to move this forward. And it's nice to see Texas coming around. Makes me laugh a little bit of all those stories and battles we've all fought to spread this word. But I just encourage everybody here to keep pouring into each other, pour into where you came from. Together, we're unstoppable. It's almost like, if you're Game of Thrones fans, feels like the White Walkers are coming. It's no time for us to fight internally. It's time to align and work together. And if we do, there's nothing we can't defeat. So thanks for having me, guys. Paul, appreciate you. Gary, you're looking good. God bless you all, and appreciate the time. Go to arcadiancap.com if we can help you in any way. Hey, Paul, I think you're on mute, my friend.
Thanks a lot for your comments. We've got about a minute left, and I did want to ask you one thing. You mentioned ESG. I'm a big proponent of that in my work as a consultant with financial advisors and investors. What about the cannabis industry is exciting when it comes to support for the environment? A lot of other agribusinesses have negative environmental impact. Tell us a little bit in another minute or so about the cannabis industry.
Well, a lot of things from an ESG standpoint. Obviously, female leadership, minority concerns, animal welfare, but in particular with the environment, you're looking at hemp as a incredible in-between crop for farmers. It's great for the soil. Replenishes the soil and adds a lot of strength to whatever their other crops might be. And so just from the soil standpoint in the earth, it's incredible. It's also recyclable. It can be re-ingested by the earth. We talk about an ecosystem of companies, but it's an ecosystem of the earth. It's the way God planned it from the beginning, and it's the way it still works now, and it's a little bit sick. And so we need to use things that can go back into the earth and be a part of this cycle that has been around forever. And so there's a lot of information on this. Would love to take more than 1 minute with you, Paul, but it comes from the ground. It's good for the ground. It can go back in the ground, and it's good. And so that's our goal here with Plant Wellness, is to bring the earth to people, allow them to have their life and not harm the earth when it goes back.